G'day guys, it's Nelson from Job Pedal, and out of all the four apostles, my favourite has always been Mark. And I'm pleased to say we have not the original Mark, but a man named Mark, a man far more interesting, I'd say, than the man from the biblical text, sitting alongside me. Mark, how you going?
Oh, not badly, thanks.
Have you ever been compared to an apostle before?
No, more a sinner than a saint, I can assure you.
More a sinner than a saint. Well, you're in good company.
Excellent.
I'll see you down below in a couple of years, perhaps.
Maybe.
know.
Redemption.
Yeah, well, we'll get one of those in before we start.
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, Mark, tell me a little about your background in work.
Yeah, I suppose in my younger years, I did 3 years as a licensed security officer and was involved in when the methadone program was first trialled in 2 pharmacies. And
when was that?
Oh, that was back in the early 90s.
Okay.
It would have been around about 1990, 1991.
Right.
And I had responsibility. I was the only security guard on site. And I had responsibility for managing the people that came to the counter demanding methadone,
Right.
and doing that by minutes. So I would be responsible for staff protection and for getting these people off the premises in such a way that it didn't affect the customers and so forth.
That was considered quite a progressive policy in those days, wasn't it? Those methadone clinics.
Yeah, but it sadly, within a number of about 6 months, it had to be pulled out because of what was going on, and it was quite a demanding sort of environment in that regard.
You must have dealt with some very difficult patrons in that time too, I guess.
Yes, I mean probably the most drastic was the gentleman who came in a full trench coat in the middle of summer and came to the back counter extremely agitated and abusive, and I had to move the young shop assistant, because 95% of staff are female. I had to move her to the side and deal with this gentleman directly. He became increasingly agitated and aggressive, and I informed him that I wanted him removed, that he needed to leave the property, and he started to move off, and he got down to the end of the first gondola and stopped. And at that point I turned to the pharmacist and I said, get the police here urgently. And I said, and we need to evacuate, staff and patrons. So I then moved down to what would have been about 5 to 6 metres from him. And he was basically to occupy his attention. And this guy just was working himself up. And very fortunately, within 3 minutes, the police arrived like an avalanche through the front of the store, and they bailed him out, and out came this damn big machete. And you can well see why when there was that incident and another incident at another pharmacy, they just said, no, this isn't the right place for this. And of course, the methadone clinics were the answer that came there, where it was a much more regulated and secure environment for the distribution.
Wow. And you didn't do any more security after that?
I was working contract work on doors in and around the city, mainly on the licensed clubs rather than the hotels.
Right.
So City RSL and places like that, I was doing contract work. And I also did other security work as well. When Pitt Street Mall was being built, was being laid out, I had the night job of being the only security guy on site in Pitt Street Mall to deal with all of the idiots coming up from the cross, and there was quite a lot of them.
Yeah, right. That must have been a stressful gig, being alone in that environment.
Yeah.
It's quite a big space too.
They gave me the choice. I was licensed to wear a firearm and to carry a baton, but both of those things I refused. I did not want, because one of the things that you get with those implements is people wanting to push you, particularly the young guys, and I didn't want that. And, there was a lot of unruly behaviour that needed to be sort of managed, often myself with a number of individuals. There could be anywhere up to 10 blokes sort of trying to rack me, and, you've got to maintain a calm and cool demeanour and be able to control that and this is at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
There's no one around for backup.
And you felt you were able to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. In all that time, I was not once physically assaulted. No one was prepared to push it beyond me, telling him firmly to stop.
And now you're doing the sector course, where you're obviously very up to date with the current legislation on security and all that sort of thing. Do you think much has changed?
Oh yeah, it's dramatically changed.
Because that seems to me that you would never have that now. One bloke doing that.
No, you wouldn't. And I think, this is one of the key reasons that I wanted to come to sector, was because of the reputation in terms of the training, and I certainly wanted to make sure that my skills were up to date and my understanding of legislation and current practices was up to date.
It was a bit more cowboy back then, wasn't it?
It was very wild.
Yeah.
It was very wild. You didn't have the cameras, and you quite often, in and around the cross, it wasn't uncommon for a doorman to be told that he had to just manage that door by himself and deal with up to 5, and he had to hold them for up to 3 minutes because the King's Cross Command said that's what the response time was, and you were expected to be able to handle.
For 3 minutes?
Yeah.
That's a long time in a stressful situation. Wow.
It is. And up and around Oxford Street and the cross, you saw, the blood flowed. You saw the blood flow.
That was the Ibrahim era, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It was a very, you wouldn't see it today.
No.
And thankfully.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
It's interesting because we sort of glorify that era a bit now. Do you know what I mean? But it seems like it was quite an ugly period.
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was a period where, the standard of training, you only had to do 2 days for the security licence. And I also did the firearms training, which was just a single day. And you can think about that in comparison to today, where you've got, this course runs for 2 weeks, and we're doing all of those, operational scenarios, which I must confess, they seem a bit tame to me in some ways because of my background, but it's good though, because, it's getting me informed about what the up-to-date manner of dealing with things is, and that's good. That's been very positive.
Yeah, great. And what about outside of security? What sort of work have you done?
Well, I ended up going into the software and services industry, of all things, and progressed basically from doing telephone support work all the way up to running a regional business unit that was based in New Zealand, and I had MBAs, CPAs, programmers, sales staff, the whole range of people, and I was responsible for the business unit achieving its revenue targets and net profit targets. So these were multidisciplinary, professionals that had to be managed, and you had to deal with those clients, and our clients were all in government and large corporates, mid-market to large corporates.
Yeah.
So a lot of corporate experience in that regard.
And you obviously had targets. I remember you were telling me before we got on air about...
Oh, yes. It's something that people are not... You see that these people earn ridiculous amounts of money in that industry, and people just don't quite understand why, and I can appreciate that. But say for my business unit, I was targeted... I was measured on what's known as a revolving 3-month trigger. So that meant that my last 3 months' sales and my last 3 months of net profit, which were averaged, if they fell below target, either one, that was my contract being torn up if they wanted to. Never happened. I was very fortunate that it never happened, but I had to take my team through the tech wreck. Right. And that was incredibly difficult because we were doing our numbers in the southern region, but the northern region really felt the bite. And we had to keep the resources up in the larger northern region. So that meant I had to sack 4 people who were doing their numbers, that were not underperforming in any sense. Probably it is the hardest thing I've had to do in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really a tough time. But you've got to make hard decisions at times.
It's kind of like the ratings here. Not that we have a problem on Job Title TV. Always number 1.
Excellent. I'm sure it is. Yeah.
So what are the skills you learn in that you think you can transfer to the next phase in security?
Well, I appreciate that I don't have current experience, and that for me, I can see that I'd have to start at the base level, and that's where I'd want to be. But I think the great thing is that I have a lot of upside in terms of moving into management and team management and so forth. My prior security experience as a young man meant that I had to keep an incredibly cool demeanour and use the voice for control and all of that. And
Use the voice, child.
well, you can hear the voice.
Oh, yes, loud and clear.
But if I actually, project that and use that, and you learn to do that. I learned to do that when I was younger. So, I think I've got a vast array of experience that could be of benefit to organisations in a number of different ways, but I know I'd have to start at the bottom there and work my way through the levels.
Yeah, fantastic. And where do you see yourself going in security?
Well, at my time of life, I think, ultimately dealing with doors and things like that, leaving, it's more in team leadership, I think, and ultimately into management. And I think there's a scope for me to do that fairly rapidly, but again, in a measured manner.
Yep.
That's where I'd probably see my, my sort of career over the next 5 years is moving into that level and finding an organisation that can see the benefes because
of your combination of experience and
the business experience coupled with the security experience. It's a broader base.
Fantastic. What about outside of work? What do you do?
Well, I've got a family of 5.
Wow.
So I've been quite busy.
Disclaimer, this is my dad.
You wish. No. So, I've got 3 boys and 2 girls. They're, my youngest is 16. She's still at high school. My oldest, he's just turned 20. He's just turning 23.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
you learn a lot being a parent.
Mate,
about yourself.
Yeah.
Your own limitations.
One day when the court allows.
Of course.
Yeah, mate, you are going to have such an easy time getting a job, I feel like, because you got that experience from the old days coupled with the legislation and the knowledge of the current practices you get at a place like Sector. You're incredibly hardworking. You thrive, it appears, in stressful environments.
Yes.
And, when you work in a lot of different industries, consciously or unconsciously, you pick up so many different skills which you can apply.
Absolutely.
And I feel like you'll do that and you're going to be a real asset to wherever you end up. So it's been a pleasure chatting, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.